And therefore, we have to have this focus, this awareness, this cognizance, this contemplation of just settle down and be aware that even though you have urges, and even though there are influencers, and even though there are influences, etc., but we have to think about why we're here, what's our purpose, and do the right thing. Through this awareness and contemplation and focus and cognizance and paying attention, we're able to conquer these 7 umas, these faculties within ourselves, the peoples that have to be conquered. But Amnam b'melchamis Amalek u'be'efen acher. So that's the 7 nations that can become part of it. Then you use, we want to be happy, we want to do something, we use it for the right thing. We use our faculties for serving God, for helping people, for being constructive and not destructive. But then there are certain things that have to be totally obliterated. And that's the idea of Amalek. The war of Amalek has to be a different thing. That therefore its goal is a total obliteration. Besides that, Amalek is full of doubts. Therefore he gets to be called and known as, he gets to be billed as the head of the nations. Because Amalek comes along and says, maybe it's not like this. Don't be so enthusiastic. Don't be so excited about doing the right thing. Amalek has something much worse, and that is that he knows God. He knows he knows what's right, but nevertheless, he knows his master, and he intends to rebel against his master. Even though he understands, he knows what the thing is right, but nevertheless, he makes it his business to intend to rebel. And in the Sfiris, this is the idea of Keser, of the clip of the other side, the L'umazeh. So the idea of Keser, not to delve into it too deeply here, but we have the faculties, the intellectual faculties, and the emotional faculties, the attributes with which we can serve God, and we have to use it using it for the right purpose. It's the godly faculties, and when we are unfortunately not doing what we're supposed to, then we're using the faculties of the other side, so to speak. So then there's the part that's called. So let's first talk about what Keser is in general. Keser is the idea that God created the world, and he's not leaving, heaven forbid, but the realm that is not just God in and of himself, but the fact that God wants to create a world, and then include us in the world, and give us a task, and give us a goal, and give us a purpose, and make us part of it. And and the whole scale of levels of godliness. So the highest level is the idea of Keser. That's the whole idea, the all-encompassing idea of godliness that God is going to create, and it's sort of straddling between God's essence and then coming into creation. And that's called the crown. These are the highest levels of godliness. And therefore, it's together with the intellectual spheres, because the intellect is what brings about the creation, with Chochmah and Bina, wisdom and understanding. And if we look at it just as the goal, the purpose of creation, then it's called Keser Chochmah Bina Kechav, because it's the idea that there's going to be creation. Whereas we're known as Chabad, and we focus on Chabad because Chabad is the actual creation of Chochmah, Bina, and Das, the result, not just the goal, but ultimately the goal and the result are the same. So that's why you only would you can only count one. You only say one of them. You can't say Keser, Chochmah, Bina, Das. When you say Chochmah, Bina, Das, Keser is all encompassing for every part of it, all of it. And just like this is in holiness, we have that also in the opposite, because God created the whole world, Zeh L'Umah Zeh. He created the holy side, he created the alternate side, the other side. And that's the side, in order to give free choice, like the Rebbe says here, that, as is well known, since a person has to be given free choice, so therefore, and you have to choose the right thing, choose life, therefore God created the opposite so that you have choice. So then, if there's this whole all-encompassing idea that there's going to be creation, and that's the idea of Keser, this crown, then there's the, so to speak, crown of the other side, that's Amalek. So this is the opposition, not just to the holy attributes and to all the intellectual faculties that are connected to the attributes. Not just to the intellect, like we said, that we have a goal, that intellect is in and of itself something to know and perceive God. But it's the evil just to be encompassing, that everything should have a goal of being evil. It's all-encompassing evil, so to speak, that's the total goal. This is unrashed audacity, this is totally unmitigated gall, total chutzpah, without any respite whatsoever, just a total, like the Talmud says, and such audacity has to be abolished. When it's rebelliousness, that can't be refined, that can't be fixed. That has to be destroyed totally. The only way to fix it is to bust it. There. Well, so the Rebbe is going to speak about in a moment. There is the idea of tshuva, and tshuva is for the 7 faculties and everyone else. And there's even a little part of Amalek he's going to talk about, that the mere fact that Amalek was created, that's also something of a connection, and it gets elevated. That's what the beauty of something that the Rebbe says here. Omnam tzarich lahavin b'halei omra razal kol masher bara kadosh baruch hu b'elam elei brayel chvedei. Our sages taught us that everything that was created was only created for the glory of God. So if this Amalek is so terrible, why did you have to make him in the first place? How could he have made an Amalek that his whole purpose is to rebel? And that's what it is. So because that's his purpose, he has to be destroyed. Why is this? How is this? In addition to what the Tanya gives the parable of the king who wanted to test his son and hired a harlot, like it says in the English translation of the Tanya, that would also be known as a prostitute, and he wanted that the son should be stronger, and he'll reward him for doing the right thing and not being seduced by this person. Now, the Alter Rebbe there brings that parable and says one of the parts of the parable is that even the harlot wants that the son shouldn't do it, but she has to still work to try to get him to do it. Nevertheless, it's created by God, so it's not something that wasn't godly, but it's there for a purpose, and its purpose is not to be used, but to be tempting. And even that one who's tempting doesn't want the one to give in to the temptation. So that's in Tanya, in the end of chapter 9 and the end of chapter 29, which we just read recently. So, Shezehu Kidei Lenasis is Ben HaMelech, this is to test him, and to bring out his potential into actual, to show that he is a tough guy, that he doesn't give in to temptation. So it's only there for the temptation and not for the evil act. So this whole idea that he has to be destroyed is also part of the glory of God. In other words, there's a certain part that has to be totally, total abstinence and total negation, and that's the idea of Amalek. You can't even work with it. The two types of wars are the two basic ways of revealing God's unity in the world. The one thing is to refine the things that can be refined. To reveal that within them there's also godly light, and it can be turned and transformed into a godly use. Even a base way they shvidas alumazah. The second way is to break the things that are oppositional to God. Through totally obliterating the existence of the opposition, that reveals that there's nothing but God. The world is godly by knocking down this type of opposition. Because there can't be anything that opposes godliness. He brings a quick parable here from, let's say, the old kings. So the king rewards his son who acts like he wants him, like the king wants, and he punishes whoever doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Both of them show the greatness of the king. In other words, if you do the right thing, you get a reward. That shows the king is great. Those who do the wrong thing get punished again. That shows the strength of the king. So you can choose which one, but they're both there to bring out the greatness of this king in the old-fashioned way. So rewarding those that do what they're supposed to do, this reveals that everyone has to do like the king wants, the will of the king. And by that which he punishes those that don't conduct themselves like they're supposed to, this reveals that there can't be a conduct which is not proper according to the king's will and wish. Like we say, so that there's something is done as a so that everyone will see and hear and see that this shouldn't be. Sometimes there has to be a public punishment, so to speak, so that everyone else won't do it. So with the 7 nations, that's the first way that you're able to transform it, make it part. This brings out the idea that from the darkness there's the light that shines forth. After you transform, take away and bring in the light, the darkness now is its absence by the presence of light is so impressive. And as a matter of fact, in our lesson that we're learning about taking over the land of Canaan, the word Canaan also literally means in Lashon Kodesh, in the Holy Tongue, a peddler or someone who sells wares. That's what Canaan really means. And so it's like with a business person. Canaan has to be then done in the business of making the world a godly place. Like it's explained elsewhere in Chassidus and other places. But Amalek, which intends to oppose and be oppositional, it's impossible to refine. But like you asked before, there's still a purpose in its creation. Everything that God created, He only created for His glory. So what's the purpose then of Amalek if he has to be destroyed? Breaking it, obliterating it. That's what brings about its tikkun, its impact in the world. Because then it's revealed that there's nobody but God. That opposition to God, then if the opposition is negated totally, then that illustrates that there is only God. This is only about this part of Amalek that's totally oppositional, to oppose and to rebel. Is bitter, and that is impossible and that has to be obliterated. But now here's this piece. And to break it, that's how you fix it. Look what the Rebbe says here. This is our Rebbe teaches us that even in everything, even things that have to be obliterated, and even though that's what its accomplishment is by breaking it, nevertheless, the Amalek comes along with a method of strength, being straightforward, being unabashed, being like straight up. That you could, the method you can use for Kedusha. And Ubaloshon Razal, Matzoi, Sheitzi, Lebi Isa, Itzi, Lebi Heter. There's a story in the tractate of Menachem, in the Gemara, about a certain student that had a weakness, and whenever it was a certain person, and he did look for women, wayward women, and finally he went to somebody who was the most expensive, so to speak, woman who sold her services, etc. And there the Gemara says that she was, the Gemara has it's a whole intricate story. She was on seven levels till you got to her, and this and that and the other. And she was supposed to be the most gorgeous person, or whatever, etc., etc. And then in the end, he jumped down and he went away. And she said, like, she was offended actually. He said, well, I wasn't pretty enough. Or he said, what happened was he saw his tzitzis, and that reminded him that he shouldn't do that, and he had a mitzvah to remind him, and he went back to the yeshiva, and he did what he was supposed to do. Well, she was very offended, and she wanted. So what happened was, she actually went to the yeshiva. She ended up going to the yeshiva, and she ended up doing herself some tshuva, etc. And to make a long story short, you can see the Gemara. It's a Gemara in Menachem. The Rosh Yeshiva not only didn't throw out the guy from the yeshiva, but he actually had her. I believe, if I remember correctly, she converted, and she certainly did tshuva, and she made a resolution to do things right, and the Rosh Yeshiva made a chasana. So that's what he's saying here. Those same sheets that were used in a prohibited way now became the linen for a holy home. And this is an illustration of total tshuva. So the Rebbe brings that in here. Even Amalek, which is its intent is to rebel. It's on Gemara, is in Menachem 44. Amalek, his whole intent is to rebel, but nevertheless his methodology, the way Amalek is straightforward, that strength, that could be used for Kedusha. For that we could learn a lesson. And that is something that could be elevated from Amalek. So even though Amalek has to be killed and Amalek has to be destroyed, and its destruction is what fixes it, etc., but there is still something, and that's why it was created, there's still something that we could learn from it. So, that could be transformed. Our sages teach us that the descendants of Haman also study Torah. His strength, the strength of it, the method of it, could be changed and used for holy. Let's finish up because we're short on time. That's what the Medrash says. Through remembering Amalek, Israel is called the descendants of Abraham. Avram Avinu was promised in the covenant between the pieces of the parts of the animal that was split, that he would receive the land of the 10 nations, not just the 7 nations. And in order to be able to receive and to accept the land of all the nations, including the 3 that we didn't get yet, that comes through getting rid of the existence of Amalek, of the opposition to godliness. That has to be destroyed. And that's within ourselves, and that's within the world. That is accomplished even before the great redemption of Mashiach, that when we ourselves abolish our little Amalek, in our own personal redemption, take out the yellow markers. This is in every single person's avoid. And again, like we said, the mimer is the strongest level of the hashpah of the Rebbe, giving the flow of his energy and his blessing and his strength and the power that he influences and helps us and coaxes us, and it comes through the mimer. So he says, and the Rebbe quotes the Tanya here, that we can bring about our own little redemption in the 6th millennia after the midday. In other words, after halfway through It says that every single week on Friday after midday, so the world started being elevated towards Shabbos. So now we're in that time when Mashiach will come. We're already more than halfway. We're already more than 3/4 way through the day of the 6th millennia, which is the 7th day. Is like Shabbos, so to speak. So, like this is Arizal teaches Vaideya Veidazu the Timche Zecha Amalek. Through the obliteration of Amalek, Nimshach Gamel Mailah in the Mochem Zecha Amalek, Zecha Amalek. Then God also then brings down this idea of obliterating Amalek and Mishkosov, Milchama, Lahavaya Amalek Midardur, like we read on Purim, the Torah reading, when it happened, that there's a war waged, the war of God, the godly war against Amalek from generation to generation. That means from the nation, the era of the Mashiach, and from the nation of the era of the world to come, the future. Then we make the ultimate dwelling for God. We draw down the essence of God, which is higher than even having light and dark and everything together. It's just the essence of God. With the coming of our righteous Mashiach, v'tekeh from Yad Mamesh, and immediately, right away, actually so. Amen. Run to shul.